I'm going to start the recording. Well, here we go. So I'm going to go ahead and start and other people will join in. But just so that you know, in the chat, I have put the link for the Zoom link in case you have friends that want to join in. So how are you this evening? Thank you all for joining us. My name is Alice Hutchinson and I'm the owner of Birds Books, an independent bookstore in Bethel, Connecticut, and I'm honored to host Miranda Beeson and Claudia Acevedo-Quinones as we celebrate their writing tonight. I will return at the end after their readings and discussion to bring your questions and comments to the authors. During the episode, please feel free to make comments or ask questions in the chat. We do ask that you remain muted, however, unless I unmute you, of course. Tonight's episode is being recorded, so if you do miss something, you can go back and rewatch. The link to our YouTube channel is going to be right on the front page of the website and will appear in the chat. Actually, I've already put the link to the YouTube channel in the chat, so that is already there in case you want to hot cite it. Our first speaker is Miranda Beeson. Miranda Beeson is the author of Ode to the Unexpected and The Jones of It, and a recent finalist for the Thomas Solomon Prize. Her poems appear in numerous journals and anthology, including Barrow Street, the Southampton Review, Melville's House Poetry After 9/11, an anthology of New York poets, and the Best American Poetry. She's been the recipient of Palette Poetry Spotlight Award, a Jody Donahue Poetry Prize, and the Chicagoland Poets and Writers Sonnet Award. As a teacher, NYSCA has supported her creative writing program in school systems K-12. More recently, she has taught creative writing and literature at Stony Brook University, where she also completed her MFA. She lives in New York City and at the North Fork of Long Island. So please welcome to the screen, Miranda Beeson, and I'm going to spotlight you to come up.
Thank you, Alice.
I'm going to go away.
Oh, goodbye, Alice. Don't go too far.
Never. But I am going to mute myself.
You're going to mute yourself. Just, I have to say a little shout out here at the top to Alice, because Claudia and I and other people here met her during the pandemic when she was hosting Write America, and it was a place that we could go. I think, was it every Monday? I think it was every Monday, where writers did what we're doing tonight, which is two people read and then have conversation about craft, about publication, about what's on our mind, about what we're reading. And it was kind of this little place that all we writers could go every Monday night and kind of stay connected. And Alice hosted that for, it seemed like, as forever, because the pandemic felt like forever, right, Alice? She's muted, but anyway, I'm just giving a shout out.
Exactly. Thank you so much. That's so sweet.
It was really, it was lovely. It was just a lovely way to begin a friendship. So I'm going to read. I always like to say how many poems I'm going to read, so nobody panics and thinks like the poet will never get off. 7 poems from Wildlife. You see my little tags here, which just came out in October. Shout out to my book designer who is here, Lauren Francesconi. And then we're going to jump to Claudia, and then we're going to talk up a storm, which we actually were texting all this afternoon anyway, me and Claudia. So here we go. I'm going to read the first poem in the book, which is a sonnet, and really has the central thesis of the book in its heart. And for those of you who don't know the North Fork, the title, I always like to clue everybody in a little bit, is Cutchogue, which is a town close to my heart in, on the North Fork. And the numbers in the title are the latitude and the longitude of Cutchogue on the North Fork. So here we go. Cutchogue, April 1, 410107 degrees north, 72.4851 degrees west. The fishhawk is back, surveying his nest from his usual perch, an edifice of twigs, twisted seagrass, popped rainbow birthday balloons, a red shred of t-shirt, the glitter of tinfoil from picnics on the beach, the detritus of man. Soon his mate will arrive from the tip of a peninsula in French Guiana, squeezing the Earth's magnetic field for signs pointing north over the Caribbean to Hispaniola, Cuba, riding the thermals 1,600 miles home. Somewhere on the Aegean, between Turkey and Greece, citizens are squeezed together in zodiacs that know nothing of stars. They huddle under the weight of waterlogged life jackets and fear, a tiny motor sputtering its way toward unfamiliar lights over a sea of broken paddles, backpacks, glittering lost cities. And then poem number 2, I don't know if I have some, oh, I do have a North Forkers here. This is a poem that my North Fork friends all emailed me and texted me saying how much they love this poem. So I'm reading this for you North Forkers out there who may actually know this locale, the place that we love, Karen's Deli. The long fluorescents bless the tops of the heads of those who wait in the AM for bacon, egg, and cheese on a roll that'll be $3.24. Salt, pepper, ketchup. Deb's sacrament requires a simple nod or not in reply, right down the line, always a next, never a last, although sometimes it's ham. Phyllis's diamond slides to the right when she rags the counter. Nicole's is newer and smaller. And Ethel's chin is red again for the 3rd time this week. So much sex, so much happiness, so many eggs cracked, scrambled, fried, wax papered, brown papered bag born on the griddle of God's grease. While the post remains stacked, high, and well thumbed by those who wait, no purchase necessary. 2 napkins per from the chrome container to the left of the register, which still dings, not a celestial ring, to celebrate the arrival of cash, no credit. Another nod and $1 tucked into the small rectangle cut out of the lid of a plastic quart container. We say grace. Okay, jumping ahead. The center of this book is called A Crown of Sonnets. It's 18 sonnets that run pretty much like a train from beginning to end. And with many crowns, the last line of the first sonnet tags into the first line of the second. So I call these sonnets my little machines. I like you to see what they look like. They're kind of tiny. These are all my little notes. You get a sense of how they run down the page. And the first one will end with stare. And then my directive, my constraint is that the next sonnet has to begin with the word stare. So it's kind of this creating music and creating a thread as the different sonnets run into each other. So I'm going to read 1, 2, 3.5. The third one is almost all hashtags. Yes, you can have hashtags in a sonnet. So I'm just going to go like this, and you'll know I'm hashtagging, and I'm not going to say hashtag. It's called Catch and Release, and here we go. The old man unzips the zipper of his cakey pants. The toddler in his stroller investigates his snot. A countertenor, earbudded, croons to what could be Bach up above the screech and roar of ungreased wheels. The number 1 train streaks into Lincoln Center. Exit singer, enter schizophrenic, explicating x-rays and salt shakers, while pale lady across the way adds eyebrows to her face. Excuse me. She a queen, we her courtiers, we stare and decide to turn away. Got to do a little water here. Ode to steam heat in New York apartments. He stares as you decide to cross the pack of poets on the conference lawn. His eyes say, fuck, in the best sense of that word. And so the royal poet, all irony and wit, writes himself right into you. With each new rosé wine, imagine groins align. Shazam! Glances slam across the storied lawn. Oh, a hit of firepower at last. Let's put the sex to use. Set lit match upon a page or two. Fire up the engine of desire. Catalog the wild, hawk-eyed heart. Stormy Daniels hawks her heart for 130K, or maybe many publishers compete. DT, hazards of the job, you elected me, and calculated risk. SD, into the lion's den, high wire act, got a tiger by the tail. Devil in a blue dress, Monica Lewinsky, we remember you. Retweet, if the glove don't fit, acquit. It's a jungle out there and flirting with disaster. Magnet to magnate, I say, Stormy D, ready, aim, fire. Fire, magma, lava, the great dying. 252 million years ago, and all due to CO2. Let's think on this as we gas up our Odyssey minivans for epic trips to drop off kids in schools that spell danger with a D for dual purpose weapons, deputies on patrol, deterrent options, dispersion, and diazepam under a cloud of halocarbons. No Vesuvian hiss this time, but homegrown killers. We are the volcano now that we no longer choose to remember. There's about 16 more of those if you want to go have fun. And two more. This is I love poetic form. I always been saying to my students that there is freedom in constraint, and I believe that. This poem is called, the poetic form is a golden shovel. It's a form created by the brilliant poet Terence Hayes to honor the poet Gwendolyn Brooks. The golden shovel is the name of a pool hall. You got to have all this trivia in the poem We Real Cool, which Hayes used when he originated the form. The challenge is, for you poets out there, I picked a stanza from the third stanza. It's the Warpland. I picked a stanza from that poem, which reads, "The earth is a beautiful place, water mirrors and things to be reflected, goldenrod across the little lagoon." So that's the stanza that I took. And the challenge is every word in that stanza has to land one after the other in the last place of every line that you're writing. Whew. The challenge is not to land on that word, but for them to kind of disappear, but still be there for OCD poets like a few people I know. It's like, oh, look, I know what that is. It's a poem within a poem. So this is, there's a rattle sometimes after Gwendolyn Brooks. Are you lost? Where is your home? My morning address to the ants who are marshaling the kitchen counter. A strange earth for this staggered colony of desperate Valian specks. There is no there here. Directionless, they scatter, regroup, and lay down a wobbly trail across the white expanse of stove in one beautiful act of determination after another. Sheer persistence to find a place to nest, a crevice between faucet and formica. Water mirrors their ant selves. Sink spray is rain falling on dry antenna, and oases appear here and there under a just washed coffee cup. Things so ordinary to we large ones are porcelain palaces and pools to you who carry bits of toast like Atlas shouldering the world. Be gone, I plead as I watch this morning's news. A woman reflected in steel, pierced by rebar, falling from a border wall. Goldenrod, she can see it through the links, blooms in San Ysidro, USA, across the way. She has traveled in a word made for pilgrims and traders. The Muslim caravans from Cairo to Damascus, the Silk Road bearing little pots of spices, honey, gems, paper, and slaves across desert and lagoon. And for my last poem, number 7, here we go. This is the poem for my mother towards the end of her 12-year journey with Alzheimer's. The title is from Auden's Most Beautiful 4 Quartets. Quick now, here, now, always, for my mother. Think of it as a long, slow bank and descent, a plane curling light as air through cumulus, the slide and jibe of jetting through ice crystals. They say that's what clouds are made of. There's the earth as seen from up above, a bright mosaic giving way from time to glittering clusters of cities, and water, always water. Its embrace of land so clear from up here, how one fits hand in glove with the other. Remember how we used to swim and swim? Swaths of houses sit trim and undistressed. Byways course like veins through the body of the country, a cantata of light and speed. Vehicles the size of childhood toys zip along shining paths towards their destinations. The living world moving in unison, complete. I say this to you, look down. It is so beautiful. You have lived here. It is waiting for you, land. Thank you.
No, thank you. Let me thank you, Claudia. Miranda.
Miranda, it's fine.
Yes,
We
our
both
next
end in
speaker,
A.
our
Go for
next
it.
speaker is Claudia Quinones, Acevedo-Quinones. Claudia is a writer from Puerto Rico whose poems and short fiction have appeared in the Brooklyn Rail, Wildness, Ambit Magazine, Radar Poetry, and other publications. In 2019, she received an MFA in Creative Writing and Literature from Stony Brook University, where she also taught poetry to undergraduate students. Her chapbook, Bedroom Pop, was published by Dancing Girl Press in 2021. In 2022, she was awarded a Lestris Boraculis Fellowship by the Flamboyant Arts Fund and the Mellon Foundation. Claudia lives in Brooklyn, New York. Please welcome to the screen, Claudia Acevedo-Quinones. So let me get you here.
Hello, all.
Hello.
Here's your Puerto Rican ghost. We were joking about how I look like a specter a little bit, but we're rolling with it. We're rolling with it. Echoing Miranda's words about Right America, thank you so much, Alice, for holding down the fort and having me over for a second time, I think. So I'll be reading 3 short sections from my book, the Hurricane book, a lyric essay. It doesn't have chapters. Not that a hybrid book can't have chapters, but mine is divided into hurricane sections. There are 6 sections. Each one is dedicated to a different hurricane that has passed through the island of Puerto Rico, where my family's from, between 1928 and 2017. Each section starts with a map, a satellite image or a weather image. After that, there's a family tree so that you can sort of like figure out who I'm going to be talking about. Then there are historical bullet points. Then there is a poem, and that's followed by short autobiographical vignettes. I tried to use each hurricane to sort of launch into a conversation about where Puerto Rico was in relation to the United States, in terms of their colonial relationship, and where my family was in that during that same time period. I'll be reading from the first section, which is Hurricane San Felipe II, which passed through in September of 1928. This poem is titled Pedro, Vuelo, Hurricane San Felipe II, Caguas, September 13th, 1928. When you are born a jíbaro into a heap of tobacco leaves, 3 months after the wind takes down the family farmhouse, you look for a roof at the bottom of a glass for the rest of your life. You walk to school with no shoes on and a cigarette in your mouth. You don't pray, you raise yourself better than your parents did. And because the worst has already happened at 100 miles an hour, you look people in the eye and tell them the truth. You enlist in a stranger's army to help feed your brothers and play the same game of war for a decade and never complain. You plant aloe and grapefruit and mango to feed your wife with the same macheted hand you were dealt. You punch in and out in the same brown suit every day to feed your daughter before cocktail hour, before feeding yourself. You kill a rabid dog with a can of sardines to stay alive for your daughter's daughter, who looks to the bottom of your glass for a roof. The second to last one is a little vignette about my grandfather. It's titled Oldsmobile. Vuelo, my name for Abuelo Pedro, drove a blue 1984 Oldsmobile Cutlass Sierra with a baby blue velvet interior. It smelled like cigarettes, agua maravilla, and pomade. He'd ride in it with the windows down and the radio on, leaning back on the seat as far as possible, with one liver-spotted hand on the wheel and the other holding a lit Marlboro Red. Sometimes there would be a Coors Light in the cup holder. Coors Light is basically water. The easiest parent to spot at school pickup was my grandfather. He would always be there waiting, or just pulling up to put out his cigarette on the sidewalk at 2:10 p.m. sharp. If for any reason he couldn't make it on time, he'd call the principal's assistant and ask her to tell me his ETA over the classroom intercom. For 10 years, I could count on him being there to pick me up. Thin, wiry, pockmarked, annoyed, impeccably dressed, uninterested in socializing with the rich mothers he barely tolerated. There were Range Rovers and Hummers everywhere then. My classmates wore Tiffany charm bracelets. That was Guaynabo in the 2000s. Vuelo was a relic. I liked to pretend he was my chauffeur father, like in Sabrina. He'd load up my rolling backpack and ask about my day. I liked watching the dust and smoke poof up from the velvet whenever I punched down on the seat for emphasis. He indulged me, but wasn't a big talker. He didn't believe in entertaining children. Sometimes we'd go to the market on the way back to his and Beba's house, sometimes to the Agencia Hípica to bet on horses, sometimes to play dominoes with his friends, sometimes straight home. His way of showing up involved minimal coddling. But for all his hardness, he was always surrounded by flowers. He grew orchids in his semi-exposed garage. He tended to pink and red roses, saved the pink ones for me, and removed the thorns. He treated my chronic ear infections with aloe from the garden. Read one more. This one is about my grandmother, my maternal grandmother, my mother, and me. Sort of about beauty, how we preserve it, and the things we do to kind of tarnish it. So a lot about hands and hair and makeup, etc. Half moon. Neither Beba nor my mother went to beauty salons. My mother's reddish-brown hair went gray in her 30s, so she'd go to her friend Letty's to get her hair dyed Revlon burgundy every 6 weeks. Beba went to a woman down the street whenever her perm needed a refresh. She wore a perm until shortly after Buelo died. She didn't get any wrinkles until shortly before she died. When strangers at the mall or at parties asked her about her skincare routine, she said it involved washing her face and body with unscented Dove bars and removing makeup with Pond's cream. Yeah. She did her nails herself. In pictures taken from the 1950s through the 1980s, everything from her cuticles to the beginning of her nail plates, the lunule, the Latin word for little moon, was silver. The rest was red. She called all nail polish Q-Tex and all nail polish remover Q-Tex. I was supposed to know which one she meant when she asked me to fetch it for her. Q-Tex was the first company to release commercial nail varnish in the 1910s, but it wasn't until the 1920s and 30s when movie stars like Clara Bow and Norma Shearer popularized manicures that it became more acceptable for housewives to wear color on their nails. Leaving the little moons bare or painting them a whitish color meant you could go longer without having to reapply. Showing the world your moons were white also meant that you didn't have to work much with your hands. But Beba worked with her hands all day. There was a weekly menu. Monday was chicken spaghetti and potatoes. Tuesday was chicken and yuca. Wednesday was beefsteak and rice. Thursday was rice and pigeon peas. Friday was chicken and Coca-Cola and yams, maybe pineapple cake. There were sauces to mix. There were rubs. There was recao. On weekends, she didn't cook, but there was always a school uniform that needed mending, always something to sweep, shoes to polish, things to disinfect. Maybe this is why she spent so much of her downtime on the porch filing her fingernails or painting them. I'd sit in the rocking chair and ask stupid questions. She'd nod and shake her head and laugh, gliding the Revlon peachy pink she graduated to in her older years down her nails like she'd been doing it for centuries, layer over week-old layer. My mother and I share a skin-picking disorder, dermatillomania, which is in the obsessive-compulsive spectrum. This repetitive, involuntary need to right or wrong might be linked to my mother's compulsion to immediately dispose of any trash containing chicken bones or pull out brown bits of grass and pick up every fallen leaf from her lawn nightly, or brush her teeth so hard she loses enamel by the day. It might explain my need to immediately clean up after a party, rewrite the to-do list when I've only crossed one thing out, tweeze every single ingrown hair on my bikini line. We pick at our cuticles until we bleed while driving, watching TV, talking on the phone, thinking. When I saw her ridged yet painted nail beds, surrounded by rawness, on all the fingers wrapped around the steering wheel, I asked her, ashamed for her, why she would hurt herself like that. Imítame lo bueno, she'd say. Do as I say, not as I do. When I first noticed my own mangled nail ridges in high school, I had no idea how they got there. That's it for me. Thank you.
Wow, I want more, Claudia, but
We can have an after party tomorrow or something.
okay. It's such a beautiful book. Where should we begin? We were talking about what we want to talk about, and we had like a 3-part thing having to do with craft, publication, and power, right?
Yes, and also perception and fear around perception and truth. Basically, all the great abstract themes that we could talk about
all
forever. I think we were interested, I know when we had our conversation a couple of days ago, we were interested in talking about our writing practices. particularly like whether or not those changed before the pandemic, during, and now, even though it could be argued that the pandemic has not ended because a lot of people are still getting sick. But yeah, do you want to talk a little bit about your
I'll
process?
go and then
You have
you'll
a daily
go.
practice?
I do now. I was thinking about this. Oh, good, we have some time. Great, 7:34.
Cool.
I was thinking about my writing practice during the pandemic because I was thinking about coming here every Monday to get connected to Write America. And how the work that, because I wasn't connecting with the world, and that so much of my work comes from my interaction with the world, that I started writing about memories. And then now I'm looking at that work, and I kind of wrote the same poem over and over again because we were all like looking for interaction with the world. I would say that's being a little critical, but the absence of interaction with the world really affected my writing practice. I've always been very sustained and disciplined, I think because I started out as a dancer, which is all about showing up for the bar every day, no matter how you feel, you know.
Yeah.
And now, sort of post-pandemic, I would say to my great relief, I've been working on this. It's a book of sonnets, and I'm about 36 sonnets into a book. I think the pleasure there is, one, because I'm back interacting with the world, so there's so many things to write about, and notes are all over the place. But also, I longed for, there was something so many disruptions during the pandemic that I longed for continuity, and that when you write out on a project like that, there's always, I have 36 sonnets that are in process. So I never have to do the poet's terrible thing, which is like, oh, another blank page. I have to start all over again. Where do I begin? So that's been incredibly, I would say, like, sort of comforting, even, because it's always there. If I can't go ahead, I can always go back to 26 and tweak that line. And in the process of tweaking and thinking, my engine gets going, and all of a sudden I've launched into a new sonnet. So that's kind of the difference in my practice between these two sort of states of mind. What about you?
I'd say I have the opposite problem. I don't have a lot of work that's ready to be edited or tweaked. I'm not very prolific. I never have been. I think because I had the privilege of being in an MFA program right before the pandemic, I had a pretty steady writing practice. I have a self-discipline problem. I need to be held accountable a lot. Maybe it's part of my having an addictive personality. Yeah. But having, I don't have a lot of impulse control. So even though writing is one of the things I love the most in the world, it's also one of the hardest ones for me to actually do. And whether or not I wanted to, I was writing every day when I was in the program.
Both of us. We MFA together, by the way, guys. So
right.
That's where we met. Yeah.
Yeah. Then when the pandemic hit, I also was privileged because I had a job that didn't take up a lot of mental space. So I could leave my job at the job, and I started a collection of poems that I never finished. I was sending out my chapbook. I sent out this book. I had a lot of friends in my neighborhood. We were always in conversation. A lot of my friends are also writers. So the pandemic was actually more generative than a lot of the years I had prior to that, because I had that community. During it, I think I kind of rested on the fact that I had to edit this book massively. And I stopped working on new things. I think also, like a lot of us, I went through a lot of mental health moments that were related and unrelated to the book. And I haven't, since I started editing this book, I haven't really written a lot of new material. One of the good things about having these like renewed, refreshed relationships with people has been that we do that work of keeping each other accountable. I meet with a friend on Sundays, we have coffee and we write, or we talk about it.
It's great.
We have mini workshops, we have rooftop readings, and that's the reason why I have anything new. It's not, things are not finished. Like, I don't feel very confident in a lot that I'm working on right now, but I'm excited to do this. And now that the book is done, and we can talk about the publishing process later and what that entails and the load.
Yeah.
But I am excited. I think I've lost a little bit of that discipline that I had before the pandemic and during the beginning of it. But I want to regain it.
Yeah. I think let's talk a little bit, because we were chatting about publication, and kind of that there's a bittersweetness to it, and that people are always like, oh my gosh, the book, rah, the book is coming out, and that both Claudia and I wanted to sort of have like a little, for poets out there, other writers, kind of a little moment of honesty, that there's also a flip side to that, which is it's done, it's over. And by the time the book comes out, like my new sonnet cycle is completely different. The voice is completely different than this book, which really came out of the Trump period and is pretty edgy. And now what I'm writing is much more thoughtful. And so it's like you've left it behind by the time it comes out. And the other thing we were talking about was kind of this, for us, the issues of exposure and feeling exposed, feeling your work is exposed, and therefore you're exposed. I feel like this is a very female thing. I don't know a lot of male writers that have this issue, but both Claudia and I went through it, and we kind of wanted to bring that up as a subject. Yes.
Yeah. A lot of this process, like the last 2 years, have been difficult for so many reasons. But in terms of the book, I've focused so much of my attention on how it would be perceived, whether or not it would be misunderstood. I've always come from a place of this deep anxiety. And I think the more time has passed, though, the more I've realized, like, I can't really control people's perception. It's not a very generous thing to do either. Like, if you did your best, like, why are you trying to control people's opinions? That's ridiculous. Like, you're part of the conversation. You're not supposed to direct it. I mean, you can if you want to, but I think it's kind of useless to do that.
It's lost energy that can be put towards the next book.
Right.
I think it's just I do feel it's, I don't know, somehow a female thing about still being a good girl, and here we have the two of us are completely different generations and still dealing with, like, oh, will everybody like it? Of looking for approval in some ways, which never crossed my mind when I was writing it, but I felt, oh gosh, maybe, certain friends of mine are going to be offended by that, rather than letting it have its life as a book. And it's its own story. It's separate from me. The speaker is not me.
Yeah. But that's also a lot of work. You're growing as a person too. These are just good skills to have as a human being. But by the end of all of it, especially if you work with a small press, which we both did, like, we also have to be publicists. We also have to organize events. We also have to write essays and interviews and do promo and graphics and all of that stuff. By the end of it, even though you've come to a sort of peace, I guess, it's like, I'm tired, man. Like, I don't sure, it's great. It's wonderful. And I feel very grateful, but at the same time, I'm tired, and and I don't feel like the person I was 3 years ago. I would like to stop focusing on this and make something new. So that's where I am. And I learned a lot though about publishing, what to say no to, what to say yes to.
Yes, we both had sort of issues with strange reviews today. We were texting in the back of our lives. Not that, but things that really things that you can't control, that you have to let go of, and you have to let the book be. It's like any piece of art; it has its own life separate from you. Let it go, do its thing, show up for it, and move on. I think. I don't know if that's helpful to other writers out there, but we have 7:44. We can open this up to dialogue, or it's something that we both went through and we talked about. Do we want to jump into having other people?
It's so
Alice?
interesting because you talk about other people's opinions. I am at the tail end of your publishing process, where I'm the one who picks up your book and says, you're going to love this. And so I'm always, once in a blue moon, someone will come back, and this has never happened with any of your books, but that'll come back and say, I really didn't love this. And I'll go, oh, I'm so terribly sorry. This is where I thought it would work for you. And I am unapologetic because they read somebody's wonderful work, because we're such a small store, we curate so tightly that I feel very strongly about everything in here. But it's something for you to think about, because you talk about letting go. It's letting go even further, because you're relying on perfect strangers to take your material and go, this is awesome, you have to read it. So it has its own life.
Yes.
And that's in a perfect world where the dreaded A hasn't taken over everything. That's where you have independent and small bookstores that are turning around and saying, this means something to me. Why don't you give it a shot? So it really does speak to relationships again. You're back to relationships. I want to ask you the two of you, why poetry? And that's a big girl question, because it's why poetry? Why not novels? Why not memoirs? Why not what about poetry drew you in?
Do you want to go first, Claudia?
Sure.
Not really.
This is not homework. You don't have to answer this.
No.
Everything is homework, Alice. Everything feels like homework. I am still in high school.
No.
In my mind and in my heart.
Okay.
I think
that I want 250 words on it. No.
On it. Yeah, okay. That I can do. I think that poetry is because I have this anxiety and this question, like, what is true? What isn't true? Is what I perceive true? Is it not true? I think poetry gives you permission, maybe because of its length, maybe because you're allowed to play with form. It gives you the option to evaluate something in lots of different ways. I mentioned this to someone yesterday, I think. Our professor, Julie Sheehan, would say every poem is a failure. And that is, sure, it's blunt, but it's also really beautiful and really freeing, because you can't say everything about something. You're never going to get it exactly right. So you just have to keep trying forever.
Well, is it music? Is it visual? Is it the words? Is it what?
Any sort of artistic expression. Like if what you're trying to do is distill like an experience or describe a thing or try to find meaning in something, like you're never going to have like a perfect answer for anything. And I think poems allow you to play with that.
I'm going to
I
go with
think.
distillation. Yes, I think it's also play and also not. I mean, I wrote 170 pages and I was just exhausted. I felt like I was swimming to, you know, the Atlantic. So I think it's also forms choose you. Like Claudia's working in flash and she's working in nonfiction in this book, which is fantastic, and poetry. And the synergy of those three different forms in this book is super exciting, guys. Because
Thank
you're
you.
moving between different moods and different energies. Like poetry, it has a sinuous quality to the beautiful poem about her mother she started with. And then there's absolute factual sections, which are facts, brutal facts about Puerto Rico. And then she has these beautiful flash pieces, like the second piece about your grandfather was, right? Is that in a paragraph form? It's
Yeah.
like that. So, but they're all, I think all of the, I would say distillation and also compression, that I'm really interested in having the most amount of impact and the fewest amount of words. It just really works for me. When I tried to write out 170 pages, it was just, I splayed out. So I think in a way, forms choose you. I mean, I know Fleming Meeks is here, and he's a journalist and a poet, and he straddled, and he's also writing essays right now. So there's somebody I admire because he's equally fluent in different forms of expression. I feel pretty comfortable like in these tiny little machines that I make that are just like filled with little crickets and lots of energy. When I get too big, I feel I lose my capacity to be potent in a way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, the freedom and constraint thing that you were talking
It
about
is.
earlier.
Yes. Yeah, there is freedom.
That explains it better than what I just said. If you have a set, concise, compact thing that you can hold in your hand, you can go crazier with it than with a gigantic novel that needs plot.
I have to give you the Diane Seuss. What's the Diane Seuss quote on sonnets teach you what you can live without? Like, oh, I freaking love that, right?
Oh,
sonnets teach you what you can live without. So it is really, when I'm working in these tiny little machines, I'm constantly like, I'm constantly pulling things out. What's the bare minimum that you can do in those 14 lines that's have power, where every word carries freight, where every article, you have to think about every article, THE out, if I can get it out.
So it's closer to the truth.
I think in a way. It's trying to
truth.
Yes, or trying, which we never reach it, but it's searching for something. But
well, it's interesting because this bookstore is next door to Danbury, which is a university town. We have Western Connecticut State University, and their MFA program is spectacular, as well as the ones that, I mean, it's really quite good. And it's astonishing to watch a student come in here, mostly in the undergrads, that walk in and they've just discovered poetry and didn't really understand, really didn't get that there were so many forms. That's the big one to me, because a lady came in today and said, I write poetry too, and it's rhyming. And I kind of go, okay.
God bless her.
God, well, yeah, but no words. Anyway, but the students come in and they've taken their first poetry class and they go, where's your poetry section? And I go, yes, it's over here. And here's, what kind of poetry do you like? And they've just started to learn that vocabulary of looking for poetry. And it's very exciting because I don't think a lot of people are raised with it the same way. I mean, I'm older than the two of you, so I was raised with so many different forms of writing and literature. How do you get through? How do you both teach?
I don't teach anymore.
You don't teach anymore?
But I am looking for teaching jobs. If anyone here wants to let me know of any
teachers,
openings.
We're all
you go, girl. You put
it
right out there. That's perfect.
No, really.
Oh, here we are.
I need work.
You can have both of us. 2 for 1.
So
2 for 1.
When you have taught, how do you? Is it through your passion that you talk about poetry? I mean, how do you get through to someone who may not know that much about it? Or what advice would you give to somebody who's writing their first book.
It's who you
It's that
read.
newness of
So
it. Yeah, well,
I think it's who you read. So I'm sorry, Mr. Frost, so I don't go there. So I'm really, when I'm teaching, teaching poets who are like dynamos on fire, that undergrads can relate to, not Shakespeare sonnets. I have taught some Horace odes, but their translations are pretty sexy. So um, I think high school poetry in high school has pretty much shut down multiple generations of writers, and that's unfortunate. So over to you, Claudia, you,
Same,
Alice. Yeah.
same. I think that there is this idea that, well, I think at least the students I was working with had this idea that poetry had to look a certain way and was written by a certain kind of person. So I guess your job as a teacher is to show them, no, there are people, I don't know, like Nicole
Patricia
Seeley,
Smith. Yeah.
Cornelius Eady, poems or songs in the end. Like there's like, I don't know, I know a lot of jocks. I loved Richard Brautigan, because he was wacky and weird and he didn't rhyme and his poems were like 3 lines, So there's room for so much. And I think that our job is to show them that, by kind of changing the curriculum a little bit, playing around with the syllabi, if we have that permission.
well, I think that you're the hope of, I just to back up a quick moment. My second largest demographic of book reader in the store, other than adult fiction, is 9 to 12-year-olds. And they're reading books in verse. They're reading Jason Reynolds. They're reading Marilyn Nelson. They're reading books that are coming out in verse. And I think initially they're doing it because it's shorter. But then when they read something like Jason Reynolds' Long Way Down and they realize the emotional impact of it, there's where the discussion starts. That's where I think that there's a whole group of kids that are queued up for what you're talking about in a curriculum.
I've taught 9 to 12-year-old poets, and they're on fire. I think it's an age where they would do anything. I mean, it was fantastic. It's a fantastic age because there's no fear and they don't really have judgments about form, and they're filled with imagination. And I loved teaching. I called them the little poets. Yeah.
But you don't think that somewhere in high school they have to learn whose woods these are?
Yeah, then that's like where they die, Alice, and then we have to revive them as undergrads. Sorry.
No, I just meant in terms of exposure. I mean, I grew up with Shakespeare and my kids did too, but it didn't mean they didn't love the edgy stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, it could be, I don't know, maybe a section in the semester. It doesn't have to be the entire semester. Like I don't remember half of the Coleridge I read in college at all, but I remember so much other stuff. Yeah.
I think what's happening now, and I don't want to go too far down the path on this one, but I read more. I mean, I was in a school
I read a lot,
and there's a lot less in the curriculum now, but I'm not going to kind of get into in terms of volume. But that's just an observation as a bookseller.
Yeah.
I do think, I don't know. Do you have a favorite author? Let me just get to that one. Do you have a favorite author? I mean, I know all of us have a list, and which of your children do you choose to keep? And
you take that one, Claudia.
I don't have a favorite one, but
or few favorite ones?
Araceli Girmay, Nicole Seeley, Natalie Diaz. I'm also a big fan of Constraint. So Elizabeth Bishop. I love her for many reasons. One of them being that she also wasn't very prolific, so she makes me feel okay. Yes, those are some of them. I like some things that are either very hybrid, research heavy, or very short, elegant, and contained.
Got it. Miranda, do you have any thoughts on that?
I'm just thinking about all my books and I
I
just
know.
can't pick between them, but I'll tell you what I'm reading, which is,
Okay, I do want to hear what you're reading because
yeah,
I'm a
I'm
bookstore
reading,
owner.
I don't know. Sometimes I do,
Oh, I love
Elaine
this.
Equi's, I love this book for better, for worse. I think sometimes to get writing in the morning, it's just really good to jump in and read a bunch of other people's work. If you're not reading one particular poet, it's nice to have an anthology like this, because you'll fall in love with something that you wouldn't have found otherwise. And I'm reading, oh, thanks to Fleming Meeks, who just wrote an essay about Kathy Fagan, Bad Hobby. Thank you, Fleming. She's fantastic. And she just had a poem in a day, like a week ago that just like, I don't know, knocked my socks off. And I'm reading this book that, you can't find beautiful old books like this still. I think this
That's
was
a great cover.
Powell's, because I did this, it was a Sunday afternoon this summer with David Baker, and the socials. He was on socials writing about Stanley Plumley. So I started reading Stanley Plumley. Isn't that beautiful? And I'm an incredible fan. Look how beautiful the book is. And so
And Miranda, you've never mentioned the title of your new book, so please hold up the
God.
cover and self-promote a
Good.
little.
Wait, you
please.
haven't?
Self-promote, girl.
He never
Self-promote.
said wildlife.
Thank you, Lauren Francesconi. She's up there in the right-hand corner. She designed the book. It's really beautiful.
It is beautiful.
Yeah.
Claudia, hold up your cover,
Thank you for that.
please.
Designed by my friend Jason Alejandro, who is not, I don't think is here, but
We're both
appreciate him
blue.
nonetheless.
It's beautiful, like the way the O,
They're both
that
beautiful
one
covers.
O is covered by a wave. Is fantastic.
They're cousins. Your book
Yeah,
and mine.
they're cousins,
They're cousins.
as are we, right, Claudia? This was such a pleasure.
Natalie did ask one
Wow,
question
that's
of
neat.
Claudia, and I
Yes.
don't want to leave without asking it. What
Okay.
what did research look like for the hurricane book? So many components to be contended with.
So, yeah, I used 2 government agencies for information about the hurricanes and their aftermath, also to source images of the satellite pictures and the weather maps. I also used census documents. I use the Library of Congress for more photo research, medical journals. So it was not the most structured process. What I did when I set out to write the straight up nonfiction parts, the historical notes, I just wrote down on a piece of paper what I thought I knew about the history of Puerto Rico in chronological order. And then I just fact checked myself. And in that process of fact checking myself, I'd find sources, which then would lead me to other sources, and I'd find things out that I had no idea about, and then I included in the text. So it was more like a connecting dots, mapping out, as opposed to a strict, a more structured approach. But there is a lot of free available information out there that the government is very willing to give away, especially if it doesn't hurt them. For that
I didn't want to
information,
leave
you
that
have to dig
question on the
deeper.
table because she said, I love the fact-checking approach. Thank you. Ladies, I'm not going to minimize you to say goodbye. I just am going to say goodbye because I have had the most wonderful hour. And I thank you both.
Thank you,
both
Alice.
Claudia and both Miranda. And obviously, as much as I always keep bringing up Roger Rosenblatt, he started all of this and introduced us.
He did.
So it's been an absolute joy to get to know you and get to know your work and to have this conversation. So thank you both for participating tonight.
Thank you so
Congratulations
much
on your books.
Thank you, Roger.
Stay in touch.
Yeah, well, maybe we'll just get in the
all.
car and drive up and see you in person, because we've never met in person, right?
Yeah, I've never been to
here.
Bethel.
Oh, Bethel's an
Okay.
awesome town, so we'll chat.
Okay, we'll chat. We'll
But
do that.
all of you, I will send you a thank you, those of you who have registered tonight, with the link to this episode in case you want to watch it again, which that's that possibility too. But thank you all for attending tonight. It's been a very special evening.
Thank you, friends.
Thank you
Thank
so
you,
Ciao,
much.
thank
and
you for
enjoy the
showing up.
holidays, folks.
Thank you. Have a good one.
You too.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
Claudia. Bye,
Bye,
Alice.
Miranda.
Bye-bye.